there's a quiet moment that changes everything. You're sitting alone, maybe on your bed, maybe in your car. Your phone lights up, not with their name, but with nothing at all. No message, no missed call, no emotional pull. And for the first time, you don't feel the urge to explain yourself or fix anything. That's when it happens. The empath doesn't leave in anger. The empath disappears in clarity. You might not realize this yet, but I'll explain later why this moment only comes after a long internal battle. And I'll also explain later why once the shift happens, it's almost impossible to go back to how things were before. Empaths are not weak. They are deeply aware. They feel more, notice more, and carry more emotional weight than most people ever see. Because of that, they stay longer than they should. They give more chances than are deserved. They listen even when they are not heard. And for a long time, they confuse endurance with love. Silence is not natural for an empath. No contact feels like holding your breath underwater. It goes against their instinct to reach out, to soothe, to repair. When there is distance, their nervous system reacts. They replay conversations. They question themselves. They wonder if they were too much or not enough. Silence feels like abandonment, even when it's self-protection. But here's what you don't see at first. Silence creates space, and space reveals truth. When an empath stops reaching out, they are no longer feeding confusion. They are stepping out of the emotional fog. Silence allows them to hear their own inner voice again, the one that was drowned out by explaining, chasing and hoping. Chasing feels loving, but it lowers your position. Not because caring is wrong, but because chasing teaches others that your needs come last. When you chase, you send a message without words that says, I will adjust myself to keep this connection. Over time, that message becomes a pattern, and patterns shape how people treat you. Here's the spine line. Remember it. What you tolerate becomes the standard. And when an empath tolerates emotional inconsistency, that inconsistency becomes normal. At first, the empath doesn't disappear. They try to communicate. They try to clarify. They try to be patient. They believe that if they can just explain their feelings the right way, something will change. But explanation without change creates exhaustion. And exhaustion eventually creates distance. I promised I'd explain later why empaths reach a point where they stop explaining entirely. For now, understand this. They don't stop because they don't care. They stop because caring started to cost them their sense of self. No contact feels hard because empaths are often conditioned to believe that love requires effort, sacrifice, and persistence. Many learned early that connection is fragile and must be protected at all costs. So when they stop reaching out, guilt shows up, doubt shows up, the urge to check in shows up, but staying silent is not about punishment. It's about breaking a cycle that was quietly draining them. Chasing lowers your position because it shifts all emotional responsibility onto you. It creates an imbalance where one person pursues and the other decides. Over time, respect erodes not out of cruelty, but out of familiarity. When access to you is unlimited, your value is unconsciously discounted. What you tolerate becomes the standard. This is why the empath's disappearance feels sudden to others. But it wasn't sudden at all. It was slow. It happened after countless moments of being unheard, dismissed, or emotionally sidelined. The final silence is just the visible part of a long internal process. There is a moment when the empath realizes something important. They notice that their absence brings more clarity than their presence ever did. They notice that peace begins to return. Sleep comes deeper. The constant mental rehearsal of conversations fades. Their body relaxes. And once that calm is felt, they become very careful about what they allow back into their life. This is why silence becomes powerful. Not because it manipulates, but because it stabilizes. It stops the emotional bleeding. It allows the empath to reconnect with themselves instead of constantly orienting around someone else's mood, attention, or availability. I'll explain later what happens in the other person's mind when the empath stops chasing and stops explaining. It's not what most people expect, and it's not about revenge or control, it's about contrast. For now, understand this. Empaths don't disappear to be missed. They disappear to be whole again. They don't vanish to teach a lesson. They step back because staying meant shrinking. They don't announce their exit because they already tried words. They already tried understanding. Silence is not the first choice. It's the last boundary. And when an empath reaches this point, something fundamental has changed. They are no longer asking to be treated better. They are deciding how they will treat themselves. Stepping back changes you before it changes anything else. Psychologically, it interrupts a loop that has been running on autopilot. When you've been emotionally invested, your brain links relief to contact. A message, a call, even a small sign gives a hit of calm. When you stop reaching out, your nervous system panics at first because the familiar pattern is gone. This is not weakness, it's conditioning, and conditioning can be undone. When you step back, your body slowly relearns safety without external validation. The space creates a pause between feeling and reacting. Instead of immediately trying to fix discomfort, you sit with it. That pause is powerful. It restores choice. You are no longer moving from anxiety. You are moving from awareness. And awareness is where self-respect lives. What you tolerate becomes the standard. When you stop tolerating emotional inconsistency, your mind begins to recalibrate what feels normal. You start to notice how much energy you were spending managing someone else's emotional temperature. You notice how often you were second-guessing yourself. Stepping back doesn't erase feelings, but it changes your relationship with them. You stop treating feelings as instructions and start treating them as information. Now let's talk about what changes in their mind when you stop reaching out. At first, there is confusion. Not because they suddenly miss you deeply, but because the pattern has shifted. Humans are sensitive to changes in emotional availability. When access is interrupted, attention is redirected. They start to notice the absence because it contrasts with what they were used to. Then something else happens. Without your constant emotional presence, they are left with themselves. There is no buffer, no reassurance, no emotional labor being done on their behalf. This creates a mirror, and mirrors are uncomfortable. Some people respond by leaning in, curious and reflective. Others respond by pulling away further because self-reflection feels threatening. This is where silence reveals truth, not through words, but through behavior. When you stop reaching out, you stop shaping the narrative, you stop carrying the connection alone. Their response or lack of response becomes information. Clear information, what you tolerate becomes the standard. When you are always available, your availability is taken for granted. When you step back, your presence becomes intentional instead of automatic. That shift is felt. It changes the emotional economy of the relationship. Now let's talk about the urge to text or call, because this is where most people break their own boundary. The urge is not about them. It's about relief. It's your nervous system asking for familiarity. The first practical step is to name the urge instead of obeying it. Say to yourself, this is anxiety, not intuition. That single sentence creates distance between impulse and action. Next, delay. Tell yourself you will wait 20 minutes. Not forever, just 20 minutes. During that time, change your physical state. Stand up, drink water. Take a slow breath that is longer on the exhale than the inhale. This tells your body there is no emergency. Most urges peak and fall if you don't feed them. Another step is to write what you want to send, but don't send it. Put it in a notes app or on paper. This honors your feelings without outsourcing regulation to the other person. Over time, you'll notice something surprising. The things you wanted to say lose urgency. Clarity replaces compulsion. What you tolerate becomes the standard. If you tolerate the urge running your behavior, it stays in control. If you tolerate discomfort without acting on it, you build emotional strength. This is how self-trust is rebuilt. So what should you focus on daily instead of chasing? Start with structure. Emotional chaos thrives in unstructured time. Set simple anchors in your day. Wake up at the same time. Eat regular meals. Move your body even gently. These are not small things. They stabilize your nervous system, which reduces the pull to seek external soothing. Focus on what brings you back into your body. Walks, stretching, breathing. When you are embodied, you are less likely to spiral in your mind. Then focus on what brings you back into your values. Ask yourself each morning, what kind of person do I want to be today? Not what do I want from them, but who do I want to be? Invest energy in places where effort is returned. Work, creativity, friendships where you don't have to perform or prove. This doesn't mean distraction. It means redirection. You are teaching your system that connection can be mutual, not chased. What you tolerate becomes the standard. When you tolerate neglect, you normalize it. When you tolerate peace, you begin to expect it. This expectation quietly reshapes your choices. There will be days when you feel strong and days when you feel shaky. That's normal. Stepping back is not a straight line. But each time you choose not to chase, you reinforce a new identity. Someone who does not abandon themselves to keep a connection alive. And something else begins to happen inside you. Your sense of worth stops rising and falling based on someone else's attention. You become less reactive, more observant. You stop trying to be understood by someone who isn't listening. You start listening to yourself. This is not about winning or losing. It's about alignment. When you step back, you are no longer negotiating your value. You are living it, and that changes everything that comes next, whether the other person steps forward or fades away. If they come back, this is where your work is tested. Not by what they say, but by what you allow. Coming back does not mean everything is healed. It only means the distance created awareness, so you move slowly. You do not rush into explanations or emotional overgiving. You listen more than you speak. You watch behavior over time. Consistency is the only proof that matters. Boundaries are not punishments, they are clarity. You decide what pace feels safe for you now. Maybe that means fewer conversations. Maybe it means not being available on demand. Maybe it means saying no without explaining yourself. You are not cold. You are grounded. You are no longer auditioning for connection. Standards matter here. Not demands, but standards. You are clear about what respect looks like. You are clear about communication. You are clear about emotional responsibility. And if something feels familiar in the wrong way, you don't ignore it. You pause, you check in with yourself. You remember who you became during the silence. What you tolerate becomes the standard. If they come back and you tolerate the same behavior with a different promise, nothing changes. If they come back and you hold your ground with calm confidence, everything changes. Not because you are trying to control the outcome, but because you are protecting your nervous system. Now let's talk about the other possibility if they don't come back. This is where dignity is built, not overnight, but choice by choice. Closure does not come from a final conversation. It comes from acceptance. from seeing reality clearly instead of rewriting it to soften the pain. If they don't return, it doesn't mean you weren't enough. It means the connection could not meet you where you were willing to stand. Silence reveals truth either way. If someone can live without addressing the loss of you, that is information. Painful. Yes, but honest. Moving forward begins with grieving without self-blame. You allow sadness without turning it into a story about your worth. You allow anger without letting it turn you bitter. You allow longing without acting on it. This is emotional maturity. It's quiet. It's powerful. What you tolerate becomes the standard. If you tolerate chasing answers that will never come, you stay stuck. If you tolerate the discomfort of not knowing, you make room for something healthier, something reciprocal. There is dignity in walking away without closure from them because you gave it to yourself. You showed up fully. You tried. You stopped when it cost you too much. That is not failure. That is self-respect. Silence reveals truth either way. If they come back changed, you will see it in consistent effort. If they don't, you will see it in absence. Both outcomes free you from guessing. Both outcomes return your power to you. Let's slow this down and summarize because clarity matters. Stepping back was not a tactic. It was a return to yourself. Chasing kept you anxious and small. Silence gave you space and perspective. If they come back, you lead with boundaries, pace, and standards. If they don't, you lead yourself forward with dignity and honesty. Either way, you stop negotiating your worth. Here is one clear action step. Today, decide one boundary you will keep no matter what. 1. Maybe it's not initiating contact. Maybe it's not explaining your feelings to someone who dismisses them. Maybe it's choosing rest over rumination. Write it down. Keep it simple. Keep it sacred. Let that boundary be proof that you are no longer abandoning yourself. What you tolerate becomes the standard. Choose carefully, not from fear of loss, but from respect for your life. You are allowed to want connection and still require safety. You are allowed to care deeply and still walk away when care is not returned. Endings do not have to be loud to be final. Strength does not need an audience. You move forward quietly, rooted in self-trust, knowing that your presence is valuable and your absence is meaningful. And when you're ready to go deeper into how to rebuild emotional safety after this kind of connection, watch the next video.